Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah Show starts right now. This is the show where we aim to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you this hour as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off this hour. Straight to the phones, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. You're on Ask Noah. What's on your mind?
Hey, Noah. This is Fish from Mississippi. I was calling with a question about the Inkscape snap. I'm having a problem with trying to access or open files that are located on removable media.
Oh, okay, sure. So browsing to that file structure.
Right, and actually, if I have a file that's in or located in a removable media, and I just double click on it to open it, I'll get a permission denied message. But if I don't use the snap, I can see it just fine.
Okay, yeah. So you know what? I vaguely do remember this. And if I remember right, it was actually, there was an upstream issue. And so there is an open bug on it, and I believe they are working on that particular issue. If I don't remember the specifics as to why that happens, but you're right, it is a snap-specific issue, and it has to do with browsing to another partition.
Okay.
So the short answer to your question is if you need to use removable storage, I guess don't use Inkscape at a snap. It currently they don't have it working properly. But like I say, I'm 99% sure that there is a bug report, and if memory serves, it was a friend of mine, Mr. Alan Pope, that responded and said, hey, you know what, that's an upstream issue, and so but it will get resolved.
Oh, okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. Again, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard. Become part of the program. Man, I can't speak tonight. You're on Ask Noah. What's on your mind?
Hey, Noah, it's Chaz. How's it going?
Hey, Chaz. Welcome back to the program.
Yeah, good to be here. So I caught the distro hopping bug again, and I landed on Ubuntu Mate, which I'm probably going to be sticking with for a while. Now, as anyone who listens to Jupiter Broadcasting or similar independent properties knows, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the Lenovo is now pushing firmware updates via GNOME software in the same manner that Dell does. And I was wondering, does that extend to other software update methods like, well, Software Updater or Synaptic or anything like that? Because one of the appeals for Mate for me is I have to install very, very little to have a complete desktop of programs that I use on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering if I need to add GNOME software to that list.
Man, I don't. That's a great question. Do you have to add GNOME software? I'd say no. The thing is, I don't. You know, if you think about what the Linux landscape is doing, Chaz, if you look at it, I mean, really, the whole idea of software centers and all of that is going to go by the wayside in favor of containerized package applications like Snaps. Probably is going to be Snaps. I mean, I'm not trying to get brand specific, but if I had to guess, that's what I would guess. I think that's going to be the future. I would go ahead and say no. Here's
that's
the other.
What I thought. I just didn't know if there was something along the lines of Lenovo only hired a developer for GNOME software or something specific like that.
No. I mean, you might get into the GTK, the GIMP toolkit, GTK. I really can't talk tonight. You might get into some of that where there's some dependencies, but they'll just pull them down. I'll give you an example. I am a huge fan of gedit. I don't know why. I just like it. And obviously, it is decidedly a no map, and I am decidedly on KDE. And I still install it, and it just pulls down whatever dependencies it needs. And I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, I can't believe he pulls down all of the GNOME dependencies just for his for a text editor. But what can I say? I like it.
Hey, and that's what Linux is all about. You put what you like on the system instead of what Microsoft or Apple tells you have to have.
Exactly. That's exactly the way I look at it, too. Hey, thanks for the call again, Chaz. I appreciate it.
No problem. Hey, real quick before you buzz me off, what time is the Schmidt show recorded at? Because I really liked what you guys said yesterday. Want to call in next week, even though it's kind of backwards, but I can almost listen live. So just what time is that again?
Yeah, so he is live. Our buddy Brad Schmidt, he is live every Monday at 10 a.m. Central. That would be 8 a.m. Pacific, or I believe it's 11 a.m. your time, Eastern.
Awesome. Great. Can't wait for next week, then.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll tell Steve you said hello.
Hey, it's Brad.
A little inside baseball there. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard, become a part of the program. So, for those of you that had no idea what we were just talking about, friend of the show, friend of mine, personal friend of mine, Mr. Brad Schmidt, does a podcast every Monday at 10 in the morning. And it's if I answer questions about technology, Brad answers questions about life. Dude is just a superb individual guy. He used to be a former pastor. He is a former truck driver. Well, he's still a truck driver, actually. He's had like 27 different jobs. He's had more jobs than anybody I've ever met in my life. And it's given him a lot of life, is what it's given him. And so he hosts a show where he talks about life. And the past couple episodes, he said, hey, do you want to join me? And so I've been joining him, and we've talked about all sorts of things. If you're into like the prepper survivalist kind of stuff, if that's at all for you, that's an episode that's going to be coming up. We're going to do an episode called Everyday Carry. And what items do you absolutely have to have when you leave the house? And so, like I said, it might appeal to the prepper survivalists among you. Totally unrelated to technology, but since it came up on the air, I figured I'd give him a plug. So that's Mondays at 10 a.m. Central. If anybody's interested, theschmidtshow.com. But this is not the Schmidt Show. This is the Ask Noah show, and we have an exciting show lined up. Coming up later in the program, Brandon Johnson, formerly of Red Hat. I don't actually know what the new company that he works for. He's probably just going to be Brandon, formerly of Red Hat forever. He's going to be joining us in the program to talk about his home automation system. He recently embarked on a home automation project, and he's thinking he's going to have it done by the end of December. He says it's mostly cloud independent, and it's not 100% open source or open protocol, but it's not 100% open protocol, but all of the software is running open source and running on top of, you guessed it, Fedora. So he's going to join us and break that down, exactly what it is that he has done and what he's doing. Speaking of our friends at Red Hat, as I said last week, we are going to be doing some more tutorial videos, and that is a area of content I would like to do more of, and so we're going to do it. I, as promised, finished my WireGuard tutorial, and that is available online. We'll have a link for you here in the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com, but you can also search on YouTube how to set up WireGuard, and we put together a tutorial. I have been living in WireGuard all week, playing with it. It's been absolutely fantastic. Wound up with a couple production instances that I didn't really intend to have, but after playing with it for a week, while all of that stuff is fresh in my mind, that's the time to put stuff into production because you're prepared for problems. The issue is I'll experiment with a piece of technology for the show, and then I always document what I do, but after I'm done experimenting with the show, it just kind of goes to the back of my mind. And I have the memory of a goldfish. Any of you that know me know that. And so I have a difficult time remembering how it was I got something to work or how it was I arrived at a given solution. And so what I find is 6, 7, 8 months down the road, I find a time when I need to put something into production, and I say, okay, well, now that software has had a little bit of a chance to bake, and if there are any problems, I'm sure they would have cropped up, and then I go to do it, and I have to reteach myself the entire process all over again. And so there are two things that I'm going to do to combat that. One is, as I'm filming tutorials or creating content for the show, I just go ahead and put it into production because I figure, why not? It's already fresh in my mind. I already know how to solve all the problems. I'll just get it into production. And yes, there is a risk that it may break, but there's a risk that it may break down the road. And in my testing of WireGuard, it has been 100% flawless. and I've put it through all sorts of rigmaroles to try to see if I could break it. Haven't been able to do so. Wound up with a couple of informal production environments which allowed me to test it in the real world, so I can come back here and tell you that if you're willing to live on the bleeding edge, it is kind of sort of ready for production. There aren't any problems with it anyway. It doesn't have a track record yet. And typically I do like to see software with a proven track history of not breaking stuff, working with other software, and being reliable in the field. And so far we have my esoteric use cases of all of a week. And so if you're comfortable with that, then I tell you to go ahead and put it into production. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. But the second thing that we are going to start doing is basically every piece of technology that I have to set up for a client that is, if it runs on Linux, if it is open source and it is useful to you, the listener, then we're going to put out a tutorial. And so following the WireGuard tutorial, we are going and for 2019 redoing a bunch of the automation stuff at the radio station. Obviously, we're working with Fred Gleason over at Powerful Systems, and he is giving us some ideas and some tips and some tricks and showing us how to really harness all of the energy out of the Rivendell radio automation system. Fred came on the program and described to you exactly what that software is. Now we're digging into the finer details of it. We have that piece of software doing so many crazy things. It could be a home automation program all on its own. So we're going to put together some tutorials on getting that set up. So if you want to create content or if you just want to use it to automate stuff, it actually is not a bad way to do that. If you want to be able to do that in a graphical environment, Rivendell gets you there. So we're going to have some tutorials there. But the most exciting tutorial that we are going to do is every so often, I'd say once every couple of episodes, I get a phone call, I get an email, I get a telegram. Somebody says, "Noel, what certifications do you recommend?" And I've given the same answer since day one of this program. I don't care about the Cisco CCENT, any of that. I don't really care about the Microsoft certifications. The only certification that I look for as an employer is the Red Hat ones. They're the only ones that mean anything to me. And that's not a I'm a Linux snob thing. It's just the Cisco certifications are a lot of taking a piece of transparency and seeing how much marker you can write on the transparency and how much marker you can erase with just a Kleenex and your saliva, and subnetting. And you do a lot of subnetting for the Cisco CCENT. But it doesn't really tell me a whole lot of real-world skills. You're testing on a virtualized environment, and it's not even the full virtualized environment. It's like some Java knockoff of part of a Cisco router. So I don't, as an employer, I don't put a lot of stock in that test. Somebody does really poorly, well, it could just be because they were expecting other commands to be inside of the simulator that weren't there. If somebody does amazing on the test, it's because they're just really good at subnetting. It's very difficult for me to say, yeah, somebody who passed that test really fully understands and grasps networking. That's not true with the Cisco, the Red Hat RHCSA. The Red Hat tests are real world tests. They give you an actual Red Hat server. You sit down and you perform a given set of tasks on that real server. All of the stuff that would be available to you on a real server or available on the server that you test on, it must survive a reboot. And so the certification really, really carries some weight. And it's not that expensive. It's about $300 to get certified. Now, Red Hat is not a sponsor of this program. They don't give me any money to say any of this. We have no formal relationship. So I'm not trying to imply or anything like that Red Hat has anything to do with this. But we are going to work with some Red Hat folks that are going to come on the program, and they are going to walk you, the Ask Noah Show audience, through getting your RHCSA. Now, we're not going to release that as a normal episode, obviously, because that's not for everybody. But we are going to release it as a separate, not training set, but just a session where you can come and join us and hang out and learn how to get one of the world's most respected certifications in IT. So if you want to take your IT career to the next level, this is the way to do it. And the folks at Red Hat are excited to give back to the community. I'm excited to give back to the community. I think this is a great way to get you to where you need to be if you want to move forward in IT. So super excited. That's planned for 2019. So we'll have a couple of tutorials leading up to that. And then hopefully all of this comes together because, as you can imagine, there are a bunch of various little things that we have to work out. So for example, for the RHCSA, you have to know how to authenticate into an Ldap server, but setting up an Ldap server is not in fact required. So how do you test or how do you practice authenticating into an Ldap server if you can't get it, if you don't have an Ldap server to authenticate with. So we have to design some scripts to customize a box to be set up for you to be able to actually perform the tasks. And so if there's anybody out there that has a lot of proficiency in Red Hat and would like to, just contact me, email us live@asknoahshow.com. And if you have some time and you'd like to help, we would love your help. Otherwise, Steve Ovens and myself, we're going to bang this out, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure to keep your eyes on that. That's going to be a fun project. By the way, for what it's worth, all of these tutorials, if you like what we do, if you go to youtube.com, you check out this WireGuard tutorial, and it really helps you out, the best thing you can do to thank us is share it. Share it, retweet it, share it on Facebook, share it on Google+, share it all over the internet, because getting our name out there is what we're trying to do. So that's how you can really help us. Brandon Johnson joins us next on the Ask Noah Show. I'm just going to make a quick stop at the phones here. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. You're on Ask Noah. What's on your mind?
Hi, yeah, I was just calling because I have Kubuntu 1804 on a W520 ThinkPad workstation.
Okay.
And I have a game that I was trying to download on Steam that I purchased that I'm trying to play, and it runs Vulkan only. And as far as I know, I have all of the right Vulkan packages installed, but I'm getting a fail to initialize error on the game when I try to run it. And then, so, I looked. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You looked.
Oh, yeah. No, so I was like looking up, I was looking up what the problems might be, and I ran the Vulkan info tool, and now, that's giving me a failed with VK error initialization failed thing, and I just don't know where to go next, on this, because as far as I know, Vulkan's still supported on my I have a Quadro 1000M legacy chip, but I have the most recent NVIDIA proprietary driver installed for it.
9 out of 10 times, that's what it is. It's a driver issue. Have you tried rolling back maybe one driver issue or so?
No, I haven't tried that yet. I don't really know the process for like going back a driver. I'm pretty new to Linux myself.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, are you in the U.S.?
Yes, I am.
All right. I tell you what. I'll give you a couple options. Here's what we'll do. So option one is what you can do is if you look what I'm sorry, you probably told me, but what is the base operating system? Are you running Ubuntu or Fedora?
It's Kubuntu 1804.
I'm sorry, you did tell me that.
Yeah.
So with Kubuntu, there are PPAs for the various different driver versions, and so what you can do is you can add a PPA for an older driver version, so you can look back and roll back one version. But I tell you what I'll do. What I'll do is I will grab your contact information, and as long as it's okay with you, what I'll do is I'll pass on our contact information to Altispeed Technologies, and we'll get a service technician to get with you and work with you on a one-on-one basis to figure out what exactly where your issue is, because past telling, I can tell you that it's a driver issue. Past that, it would be very difficult for me to tell you in a 2-minute radio call exactly how to go about troubleshooting that. But I can get you to the people that can help you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. You're on Ask Noah. What's on your mind?
Hey, Noah. I have a very important meeting coming up, and I'm trying to execute that meeting through Linux. And you've mentioned being a big fan of Zoom over the last few episodes.
Yes.
So this meeting is being conducted over Zoom, and I'm going to be giving a live demo. And I wanted to see if there was some way to do picture-in-picture. I don't know if I need to set up OBS, so I can have my demo and my webcam in the bottom right-hand corner, and then present that to Zoom, or if there was some way I could make that happen.
Yeah,
Just
Zoom native
go an extra little mile.
Yeah, Zoom natively has a picture or a screen share function. So yeah, you can absolutely do that natively in Zoom without any extra hardware or software. However, if you have a capture card like either the Magwell 30 frames per second native Linux capture card. If you've got something like that, it might not be if you have an OBS rig and you can spin that up and feed your laptop into it, then you can have like graceful transitions and you can go back and forth and you could really wow the attendees of that meeting.
Okay, I might have to run over to Micro Center tomorrow then.
Yeah, I mean, if it were me, if the meeting were important enough, I guess that's what I would do, simply because again, that wow factor and the ability to have control and also stability, right? Zoom, the screen sharing function, you're essentially, trusting that your web browser is going to hold for it. Whereas if you use something like OBS, now you've got dedicated hardware running dedicated software that is specifically designed to do video switching, this, that, and the other. So that'd be my first choice. And if that gets you there, great. If that doesn't, then you simply, or budget doesn't allow, then you simply fall back to the built-in functions. Again, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@AskNoahShow.com. You can also join us in our interactive mumble room. Brandon does that. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah.
I'm going to have to assign names for all you regulars that show up here all the time. So, Brandon, you automated your house.
Yes, I did.
All right, so tell me the story. So I guess let's start with this. Why did you decide to automate your house? I mean, what's wrong with just getting up and turning the light switch on and off?
Well, I'm lazy.
We share that in common.
But part of it is mostly, I want to be able to just know if my lights are on in my house, whether when I'm home or not. That was a big part of it. And also, I just wanted for me, it was just a fun science experiment.
Yeah, it's always fun just to have toys to play with.
Absolutely.
All right. So what did we automate? Did we automate just the lights? Did we automate lights and security system? Did we automate everything that has a plug on it? How far did you go?
So I started off with just lights. So let's kind of go from. So one of my requirements is that everything had to be independent. So like I still had to be able to go to a light switch and be able to turn it on and off. And not just do it from my phone. That's that I don't want to. That's a big no for me. It has to be able to do it traditional way. So I start off with lights, and if I figured if I could get the lights work, I could get buy-in from the wife, right? So yeah, that's the most important thing. Is if it fails, it gets ripped out. I think you have that story with X10. You try to do it and then you had to rip it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spousal approval. It's very much important.
Absolutely. So I started off with the lights. Then I moved into a few other things around the house. Locks was another one of them, which I'm actually now reevaluating. But and then garage door. Things of that nature.
What did you use for the actual light switches?
So for those, I'm using Lutron light switches. The reason why I picked Lutron, one, I can go to Home Depot and buy one if I need to. Mm-hmm. Number two, the protocol that they've used they've been using that protocol for well over a decade. It's tried and true. I've seen it in commercial applications, not just in home automation applications. So that was one of the reasons why I went with Lutron. And also it ticks the boxes. It does not require a cloud service.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's interesting because I also I went with Lutron when I did my automation system and largely for the same reasons. I had worked with them in a commercial space and they had worked incredibly well. And they also, they have a proven track record. So it's not, Lutron doesn't make a device that's going to be here today and it works with whatever the current API is. And then all of a sudden something gets updated on some server somewhere and somebody doesn't want to support it. And so it goes by the wayside. These are the kind of devices that you put in your house for 10, 15, 20 years. And I feel comfortable that Lutron has the reputation to do that. And they also work with all the big automation people as well, right? They work with, they work with Crestron and all those places. So yeah. No, absolutely. I agree with that decision 100%. And what did you go with for locks?
So with locks, I went with Z-Wave Schlage locks. So that kind of goes back to I am reevaluating that because of some vulnerabilities that were discovered after I bought the locks in the Z-Wave protocol when it comes to the secure Z-Wave protocol. So I'm reevaluating that right now. And then above all of this, though, is OpenHAB. So I'm using OpenHAB to kind of orchestrate all the automation. So like when I leave the house, like I press the button to lock my door, it automatically turns off all the lights, does all that. What's great about it is like I'm kind of using OpenHAB as a shim above all of these, so that when I do go to replace the locks, it's not going to affect the automation that I have underneath.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing is it gives you a central point, right? The nice thing about having that, it gives you a central tie point. So so you haven't done alarms yet, right?
Nope, I have not done alarms. I've done motion sensors, which are also Z-Wave. Actually, I have a cool way I'm handling Z-Wave that we can get to in a minute.
So where I want to go first is with when you go to add an alarm system, you have even if you don't have to worry, is my alarm system compatible with both my lights and my lock and this and that and this, that, and the other? That problem gets to be a real issue fast. And so the advantage of having a central home automation controller like OpenHAB is that you have one place, and as long as your alarm system can talk to OpenHAB, and as long as every device can talk to OpenHAB, then OpenHAB can be the intermediary to facilitate logic and stuff and doing this, that, and the other as things happen in the house. I'll give you a perfect example of that. I have a access control system that sits on the front of my house. So it takes an RFID chip, and when that RFID chip is authenticated, then it sends a command or a basically a string to my home automation controller that says, "Hey, somebody presented valid credentials at the front door, and so I would like you to request to unlock the door." And it sends a command to the electromagnet that sits at the top of the door and unlocks the door. The advantage of having that central point, because I could do that all just in the key controller, the advantage of having that central controller is that central controller then can reach out to the home security system and say, hey, he doesn't need to enter a PIN because he already presented valid credentials at the front door. By the way, turn on the entryway lights. By the way, set the temperature up to 68 because he's home. And so it will do all of those things, and that's only possible because none of those systems necessarily could talk to each other. That's only possible because of the central control. So talk to me about the interesting way that you're handling these lights through Z-Wave.
Yeah, well, Z-Wave, the way I've been handling Z-Wave is, so OpenHAB, let me explain this first. So OpenHAB is actually running on a virtual machine in my overt cluster in my basement. Now, with Z-Wave, you usually need to use some sort of like a USB stick or like with a Raspberry Pi, there's actually a Z-Wave controller that goes into the GPIO board. Mm-hmm. So what I'm using is a open source project that hasn't been maintained in years, but it works. And what it does is it's called REM Serial, REMSERIAL. Now, what REM Serial does is it takes a serial device and presents it over the network. So what's cool about that is I can just put my Z-Wave stick on a stateless Raspberry Pi, and then OpenHAB is just on my in my virtualization cluster. So if that goes down, my entire automation doesn't go down. Just my so if like that Raspberry Pi blows up, I don't have to worry about my home automation stop working. You know, that's not going to stop working. But what's because OpenHAB's not going to go down because it's virtualized. It'll just go. If one of the hosts dies, it's automatically going to get respun up on one of those other hosts. So there's a real advantage of using something like that in this, but this is something I can't remember where I read about REM serial, but I got that set up. It's pretty cool. I think it's one of the best ways of handling serial devices today.
The REM serial, I was just looking at that. It's a really interesting project. I've actually used a device called a Device Master, made by a company called Comtrol, and the advantage of REM serial is obviously there's no cost. You can just download the software and run it on an existing device. If you didn't want to go through the trouble of setting out that piece of software, having a dedicated device, and worrying about the code base and all of that, I highly recommend the Device Master. Like you said, same thing. It basically takes a serial port and encapsulates that traffic and spits it over IP so that it can be then retrieved at the other end. They have drivers for both Linux, Windows, and so any machine that I run virtually that has to have serial control, I use one of these Device Masters, and they make them in a 1-port, I think a 3-port, a 5-port, and a 6-port. So absolutely fantastic device. And of course, we'll have links to both our REM serial and the Comtrol in the show notes. The other thing that I've used Comtrol for, and maybe this is kind of what I was thinking, Brandon, that maybe you had used REM serial for, is console ports. Back in the days where you had switches and routers and stuff that you had to console into.
No, I haven't used that for that. I stumbled across this. I actually think it was a blog post someone that was using Home Assistant. So it was a similar use case for me, except instead of OpenHAB, they were using Home Assistant. I'll send you the link to that in the Telegram.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, well, so far you have the 100% approval of the Ask Noah show for your choices, your design choices. I think you're doing a fantastic job. So are you totally separated from the cloud?
Yeah. Well, mostly. So like OpenHAB, I can do is I can have it. So I have an iPhone, so I can actually use OpenHAB to present it as a HomeKit device. So everything can be presented to HomeKit. Another thing that's really cool is if I wanted to bring in Amazon Alexa into the house, I could do that as well. And then if I don't want them in there anymore, listening to all the things I do, I can throw them out, right? So, and it doesn't affect my setup at all.
That's very cool.
It's like if Mycroft happens to, take off and the devices become affordable, I go buy a Mycroft and boom, it's I have voice recognition for my home
automation. Yeah, no, that's really great, and part of that is because you're using the central controller and because you're using open standards, open protocols. Yeah, and so software is it all open source, mostly open source?
So obviously, except for all the software is open source, but the protocols, obviously, since I'm using Lutron and Z-Wave in this, that are not. But it's not a perfect world.
Is Z-Wave not an open protocol?
I think there's like a standards body, but it's not technically an open protocol. Zigbee is an open protocol, but Z-Wave, I don't think it is. I might be wrong on that.
Interesting. So. Okay, I was doing some looking. It looks like Open Z-Wave is an open source cross-platform version of the Z-Wave protocol that has been released into the public. Well, regardless, open standard, closed standard, the point is it is a standard, and that standard is compatible with open source software, which is, I guess, at the end of the day, what we really care about. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that will get bogged down by the devil in the details of the fact that the protocol itself is an open source, but, what are we really worried about here? It's all, as long as if it's not going out over the cloud, I'm not that concerned. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. And then operating system, I assume some sort of Red Hat / Fedora flavor?
So everything is either CentOS or Fedora. The Raspberry Pi is running Fedora. OpenHAB is running CentOS.
Are you a fan of using Fedora for servers?
I've used it for servers. I do use it occasionally. I do have this Skull Canyon NUC that I kind of use as like just like a test bed that's running Fedora.
Yeah.
But Fedora, it's running Fedora server and a bunch of guests of various flavors, whether that's CentOS, Fedora, Debian. But that's all it's used for. But yeah, it just depends on my use case. Like, how fast do I need it to move?
That's fair. I'm always worried anytime I'm a huge Fedora fan. There's not a single version of Fedora that's ever come out that I haven't used on at least one of my machines. But I do get a little concerned as it relates to Fedora when it comes to things like updates, because personal experience, I've not found Fedora to be the easiest thing in the world to continually update. Although, albeit the past 7, 8 versions, I've not really had any issues. But prior to that, it seemed like it was a little hit or miss. And then my other issue is that it's so stinking fast. A 6-month cycle, that is fast, especially if you've got something like a home automation controller. As the chat room points out, it says, well, if the central controller goes down, you might lose some stuff. Now, in your case, and in my case, the lights are still going to function because they're all actually locally switched. They're just capable of speaking, in the case of Lutron, through RF and into IP back to whatever the device is. But at the same time, if that controller goes down, you do lose a critical function in your home.
Yeah. Well, so the controller is virtualized. So, and I have 3 hypervisors, and my guests live migrate between those. And it all is shared storage, so if has to have shared storage to live migrate. But if one of those hosts goes down and OpenHAB happens to be running on that, over is the way it's designed is it'll automatically turn those VMs back on that I've decided needed to be highly available. In this case, OpenHAB's one of them, and it will automatically turn back on one of those other hosts. So I'm not that concerned about that.
Did you just use the term highly available in your house?
Yes, I did.
Okay. You've earned the next level. You just leveled up in geek points, man. So the other thing I wanted to pick your brain about, unless you got anything else that we got to talk about the home automation thing, I think that's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. I really like it. I'm going to model some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I just my whole goal with this is there should be no single point of failure, because for me to maintain spousal approval, I have to have 5.9 uptime, right? So
I'll tell you a little story about spousal approval, Brandon. When I first got married, I was probably married maybe 60 days. That's the window where picking out curtains will cause a divorce. I mean, it's just crazy, right? And I said, honey, we are going to install a home automation system that has access control on the doors. And so I'll issue you a RFID credential, and then you'll present that. And if a valid credential is presented at the RFID reader, the door will unlock. And I said, the great thing is you will never have to remember to lock the door, because the door will automatically lock behind you within 5 seconds to ensure security and integrity, of the premises. She's wholly unimpressed by all of this, but she reluctantly agrees. And so I put out this entire system in. And the first couple of times, she would leave for the grocery store, and it was kind of nice. She'd just pull the door shut and the door would lock or whatever. Well, about a week after that, she goes outside to get the paper in her bathrobe in North Dakota in February at, 30 below zero. We can all see where this story is going. And goes to come back in and realizes that the door has locked behind her, ensuring the security of the premises within 5 seconds. She's beating on the door, and so I come and answer the door. And that was the day, Brandon, that I learned when your wife asks you why the door locks after 5 seconds and she couldn't get back into the house, the appropriate and correct answer is not, well, honey, why did you not bring your RFID credentials to present for valid entry? She was not impressed with that answer, and thus the security time was changed to 30 seconds, and a pin pad was added outside to bypass the RFID entry when somebody forgets their key. So I learned that lesson the hard way. To maintain spousal approval, we had to make some compromises on security.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
One other thing I wanted to talk to you about while I have you is there have been some crazy updates to Cockpit, and Cockpit has made some amazing advances. One of those things that the first time you see Cockpit, if you're not familiar with what Cockpit is, it is essentially you're taking server administration and turning it into a web dashboard. I mean, that's really what it is. And they have done an absolute bang up remarkable job. You and I were chatting about Cockpit actually replacing Virt-Manager, which is a local GTK application that is used to manage virtual servers that are run on libvirt. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I was just playing with this, and if you're not running Fedora full time, you're not going to see this because so Cockpit has looks like it has a 2-week release cycle, and Fedora gets those releases every single time there's a new release. And I just happened to notice this, and it's almost there. It's not quite there yet, but so like a few releases ago, you could spin up virtual machines. That's it. Be able to access them via an HTML VNC console, things like that. Nothing too fancy, stuff that you just would expect. At least that I would expect. In this latest release, they now allow you to add network devices to the virtual machines, which was new. A few releases ago, they allowed you to add disks. But what came in this release was the ability to add storage. And that one was just I'm like, oh, this would be so all that I need to do is be able to not just add a network device to the virtual machine, but I need to be able to add networks, but like virtual networks inside the UI. And as soon as that's done, I'm like, Virt-Manager is done. Like, I don't need it anymore, and that would be so nice. So it's getting there. It's not quite there. But yeah, I was happen to play with it, and I'm like, that's when I pinged you. I'm like, you can almost replace Virt-Manager with Cockpit, and that made my day.
And this is not to rag on Virt-Manager because you and I are both big fans of libvirt, but let's face it, it is a dated application. I mean, the interface feels clunky and old. It very much accomplishes. It's capable of very powerful things, but really, what it was designed for was. Everybody, the real ninjas use versh commands. When you want to go power a VM up or power one down or duplicate one or live migrate, all of the ninjas use versh commands. And so they drop to a command line, they issue a versh command, they tell it what you want it to do. Where Virt-Manager really came into its own was system administrators that said, listen, I'm used to having buttons to click on to start and stop the server. I'm used to having buttons to click on to do this, that, or the other. And so thus Virt-Manager was born, and to give you, of course, VNC screen scraping of the console access to your virtual machine. So it's a useful tool. It was great in its time, but it is great to see that we have an option for something that can be a little bit more modern, a little bit more lean, a little bit more aggressive, and still not have all of the overhead of like a Proxmox server or an OpenStack or any of those things. It's literally just the hypervisor and a way to control it. And of course, Cockpit then goes above and beyond that because you have full administrative control over the server for doing administration tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. So like that's and what's great about it too is like anything that you do in Cockpit does not affect anything you've done on the command line. So that's so if you add a storage domain, that's for those not familiar with libvirt, that the storage domain is where your VMs are stored. If you add a storage domain in Cockpit, that is reflected on your libvirt server.
That's absolutely awesome. Well, Brandon, I can't thank you enough for always taking the time to come here, always explaining this stuff. I would love to check in with you in a couple months and see how your home automation project goes. I'll also ping you for help when I start incorporating some of the stuff we talked about here today, because I think it's exciting, cool, and it's great that home automation has gotten to the point where we can do it on Linux and with open source and mostly open protocols.
Yep. I'll talk to you soon, Noah.
I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Again, open phones this hour, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. If you've ever wanted remote access to your home server or your office server, you have probably considered a VPN. The problem is oftentimes VPNs are difficult to set up. We actually did a large project for a large client. They've got 3 remote offices, and it took us we spent a week out there setting up all of the VPN stuff. Now that was a particularly complicated and complex series of setups because essentially no one office could ever go down. which meant that we had redundant internet connections, and we had redundant servers, and there was a bunch. It wasn't just the VPN that took a week, but it wasn't an insignificant portion of the time either. Let me tell you that. So VPNs are one of those things that I typically try to stay away from unless I absolutely have to get in there and set one up. Oftentimes, what we'll do is we'll set up a simple VPN like a PPOE, which that's a pretty straightforward thing to set up, but it's not very secure. And so really what you want to be doing is you want to be setting up things like IPsec, OSPF if you want to get some routing in there. And that has always been a difficult, challenging task. To set it up properly, you're generating certificates and you're moving things around, and it's probably a couple hours to set it up. Well, there is a project called WireGuard, and WireGuard seeks to blow all of that out of the water. To give you an idea, OpenVPN, 600,000 lines of code. IPsec, 400,000 lines of code. Do you want to take a guess at how many lines of code WireGuard has? 4,000. No, not 400,000, not 40,000, 4,000 lines of code. From a security standpoint, it is so much easier, it's so much more efficient to audit 4,000 lines of code as opposed to 600,000 lines of code. Then you get Linus Torvalds, and he steps up and he says, hey, I just want to say again that WireGuard is incredible, and I hope it gets merged soon. It might not be perfect, but I've skimmed it, and compared to the other horrors that are OpenVPN IPsec, it is a work of art. And that's really what started to get me thinking. And as I've watched WireGuard evolve, and as I've watched the people speak about it, and Jason Donenfeld speak about it, I've become more excited about it. So I asked you last week, what would you like to see in a tutorial? Would you like to see more things of Rivendell? Would you like to see WireGuard? Would you like to see, I think Tink was brought up, or there was another VPN too that we had looked at. Zero Tier, I think, was brought up. What would you like to see? And overwhelmingly, you, the Ask Noah audience, voted for WireGuard. So we delivered on a promise. We went through, we dug in, we did the necessary research, learned everything there was to know about WireGuard, and we produced a tutorial. It walks you step by step through exactly what you need to get WireGuard up and running. And let me tell you, that is not much. It is essentially as simple as setting up SSH. You generate a certificate pair on the server, a client and a public and private key. You generate a certificate pair on your client, a public and private key, and you exchange those keys, put in a host where you want the client to connect, and Bob's your uncle, it's up and working. I set one up at my office. I set one up at my house. I have one set up at a client. I am currently playing with setting up 2 WireGuard instances on 2 dedicated machines that are at both ends of a client connection, and having the WireGuard facilitate the entire 2 networks being bridged together. It is a phenomenal piece of software that really simplifies a need that has been around for so long, because so many of us want to have secure access to our devices, and we're not able to get there. And now we are. Now, I am not a cryptologist, and I don't play one on TV. But the basic idea of encryption is based on prime numbers. So we're all familiar with what a prime number is. It's a number that can only be divided by 1 in itself. So for an example, 7 or 13. Now, if you take 2 of those prime numbers and you multiply them together, like if I multiplied 7 times 13, I would get 91. 91 is a special kind of prime number. It's known as a semi-prime. And the idea behind a semi-prime is this. It's very easy to calculate a semi-prime. Take 2 prime numbers, multiply them together. However, if I give you the number 91, there is no way to undo the math. There is no way to figure out which 2 prime numbers I used to arrive at 91. The only way to do that is trial and error. And so I'm doing it with, a single digit number and a double digit number. But now imagine if I had numbers that were, 5,000 digits characters long, or 250, characters long, and you multiply those by each other. You can imagine how many hundreds of thousands of millions of years it would take, even hundreds of thousands of computers, to guess what that number is, if they could ever do it with our computing power and, electricity. So this concept of semi-primes is a very practical way to implement encryption. So that's the fundamental idea behind how encryption works. That's the fundamental idea of what a private and public key are. The private key would be something like 7 and 13, the two prime numbers that we used. And the public key, the thing that we give out to everybody else, is 91. So if somebody says, "Are you 91?" and I say, "Yeah, I use these two numbers to arrive at 91," I can prove that I am in fact 91 because I have the two secret numbers that I use to create the public number that we give out. But WireGuard goes above and beyond that. The encryption that they use is ChaCha20 for symmetric encryption, authenticated with Poly 1305 and using AEAD construction. Curve 25519 for ECDH. Blake 2S for hashing and keyed hashing. And SIP hash 24 for hashable keys. Now, does Noah understand in detail what all of those things are and exactly how they work? Absolutely not. But if you are a cryptologist or if you care about the encryption, that is the encryption that they are using. And I have talked to a couple people far smarter than me that assure me that WireGuard is doing it right. And they have nailed down a reliable, fast, easy, but very secure way to establish a remote VPN connection back into your system. So if you want to set that up, we'll have a link for you in the show notes. We'll show you exactly how to do it. If you don't have two machines you can rent a couple of virtual machines from a number of different VPS providers and try it out that way. Maybe get yourself some presence in the cloud, and then you can use it for browsing the internet from what a DigitalOcean server and their amazing bandwidth. I don't know what you want to do, but you absolutely have to try WireGuard. It's an absolutely fantastic product, and I think it's going to become the next standard of VPNs in our industry. So definitely, if you work in the industry, something to watch. Again, open phones this hour, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. You're on Ask Noah. What's on your mind?
Hi, Noah. How are you doing today?
Hey, pretty good. How are you?
Excellent. So I have a question, not quite related to WireGuard, though I appreciate the coverage. Kind of what I'm wondering is somewhat related to Linux in that how do you balance being pragmatic with, certain like online services versus rolling your own? You balance the pragmatism versus the convenience. So say something like hosting your own, photo server or your Nextcloud or whatever, and tagging your own photos versus uploading them all to Google because it'll be able to, for better or worse, it'll be able to tell you, what's going on with your, what's in the pictures.
That is a great question. That might be one of the best questions I've ever gotten on this show. Here's my answer to that. My answer to that is, what can I live without? So, for example, I back my photos that I take on my Android phone up to Google. And the reason I do that is twofold. One is, if you opt into backing your photos up from your phone, it automatically syncs them up to your Google Drive and then deletes them off of your phone. So in the Google Photo apps on my phone, I can swipe through and pick any picture I want to look at, and it will open it up. But it's quote-unquote streaming that photo from the cloud. It's not actually stored on my phone. So I don't have to buy as big of a phone to keep track of all my photos. It also means I don't have to, every couple weeks, dump all of the photos off my phone and save them to my NAS, which is what I was previously doing. Now, how do I arrive at the conclusion of, do I want to store all these photos on my NAS or do I want to store them on the Google Cloud? The answer to the question I ask myself is, can I live without it? If all of a sudden tomorrow Google Drive crashes and I lose every photo I have ever taken on Google Drive, do I care? Can I live without them? If the answer to that question is yes, then I'll use the cloud service. If the answer to that question is no, there are valuable photos on there that I really want, then I won't use that service. And so how that plays out, practically speaking, if I take a picture of my ridiculously adorable children that I want to keep, that photo gets downloaded off of my phone just as I ordinarily would onto my laptop and stored in my normal process for storing photos. But when I'm walking in, we are building another studio to accommodate making more content. And I was visiting with the painters, and we wanted to replicate one of our other studios. And so they said, what paint do you want to use? And I couldn't remember the name of the paint color. So I took a picture of the wall and brought it into the paint store and said, I need, however many gallons of this paint. That is not a photo that I really care where it winds up, and I don't really care if it gets deleted, but it's nice to have access to that. So a year from now or 2 years from now, if I ever need to find that paint again, I can just go back to my Google Photos, scroll through till I find roughly the date that we built this new studio, click on the picture, and it pops up and shows me, the color of that paint. So in those kind of instances, I don't mind using cloud services. I'll give you another example. I have a Netflix subscription. Now, I canceled Netflix a while back because they didn't support Linux, and I told them that I would re-sign up when they supported Linux. True to my word, as soon as they started supporting Linux, I signed back up for Netflix. Now, how did I make the decision? Do I want to stream content off the cloud, or do I want to own that local media? If it's content that I don't care about, I'm watching a TV show, and all I want to do, my only goal is to get through the TV show. Maybe I don't like it, or maybe I just wanted something on in the background. I have no problem streaming that. If it's a program I like, if it's a movie I like, if it's a TV show I really enjoy, I'll go out and purchase that TV show, up to and including even like documentaries and stuff that I've seen on Netflix. I go, hey, that's really, really cool. And I use it almost as like a preview service. Now, if Netflix tomorrow goes away, I can with 100% certainty tell you that anything I liked on Netflix, I own. And anything that I don't own, I don't really care if I ever see it again or not. And so that's kind of how I answer that question. It gets a little more dicey when you come into software choices. Like, for example, many people have heard me numerous times say, I don't own a Windows machine. All of my machines are running some form of Linux. That's not to say I don't use Windows. It just means that I don't own any machines that run Windows on them. I use Windows inside of VM for all sorts of things when I need a given tool. This week, again, going back to the studio build we're doing, there's these little lights that sit on top of the mic poles that tell us when the phone call's coming in or when the microphone's on or if somebody's at the door or whatever. And they have to be programmed with a piece of Windows software that plugs into this light. Now, once you program it, we never touch it again. I tell it if I want it to flash or if I want it to be steady or whatever. So I have no problem using Windows to program that light because, again, if the software ever goes away, if the program ever goes away, I just won't use that light. It doesn't matter. I don't care. First of all, that particular light is already programmed. And if I really absolutely needed to change the programming, I can always send it into the company and they'll program it for me. In fact, if we had known what we wanted, we'd probably done that anyway. So it's one of those things that I don't have to have that piece of software. It's not required for me to do anything. So I don't mind using it then. Where I draw a hard line in the sand, I won't install Windows on Metal because I simply don't trust it. I don't trust the security. I don't trust the reliability of it. And then the other part of that is I won't use any Windows program that I become dependent on. If there's some program I need, I'm going to find a way to do that thing in Linux. And part of that is just to keep me sharp on the show because I'm able to answer those questions for how anybody else wants to do it. I can say with again, no equivocations, listen, you can absolutely do your entire job, whatever it is that you do, you can find a way to do it on Linux because I found a way to do it on Linux. And I'll help you find a way to do it on Linux if you can. That's a really long-winded answer, but does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. It's a difficult line to tread. It really is, and it's one of those things where I still struggle sometimes. Where I'll sit there and I'll go, man, is this one of those things that I'm becoming reliant on, and do I need to go find a Linux alternative, or is it something I just don't care enough about, and so I'll just run it on Windows? But kind of a good checksum for me is I don't back anything up on Windows, up to and including the VM. So they get destroyed every time I get a new laptop. The VM goes away, and if there is a piece of software I was relying on, I'm hosed because I don't know where to download it again, or I'd have to go find it and set the whole thing back up. Nothing in the Windows world is persistent. And if I have clients that have to use Windows, which is not my choice, but if they tell me, hey, we've got this piece of software, it's going to run on Windows. If you want a paycheck, you'll make sure it works. You can put Linux where you want to put Linux, but you have to keep this particular thing running. If it's that, then we just virtualize it. And then what we do is your Windows, the entire operating system and your stupid application become just basically one little tiny application component to my Linux system. And that's kind of the way I look at that. Really no different than using Winer, to get Windows applications to run, which, I mean, we as Linux users use things like TeamViewer all the time. So I don't have a problem with that at all. Real quickly, we don't really have time to dig into it, but just kind of as a kicker story, Microsoft is dumping their Edge HTML, which is essentially the render engine for Microsoft Edge, which is the replacement for Internet Explorer, and they're replacing it with Blink, which is the render engine for Chrome. I find that to be hilarious. Because we as Linux users have said basically since day one, Internet Explorer is a flaming piece of trash, and nobody should ever use it. And when they announced that Edge had come out, we're like, well, that's not really any better, Microsoft. Microsoft is learning. I mean, I would have preferred that they just said, yeah, we're just going to discontinue our web browser and you can use Chrome like everybody wants to do. But hey, you know what? This is not a bad second. Make sure to check out the download, podcast.asknoahshow.com. You're only getting part of the show if you're not visiting the show notes. That has all the articles and references you need to become a part of the program. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. Huge thanks to Ben, our producer, Sarah, our call screener, Rakai doesn't edit video anymore. What am I talking about? We'll be back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com. See you then.